Hey Fig fam. Figs and coffee. Guys, last day of August. And I want to talk about fig trees, obviously. Topic I want to cover today is how fast does a fig tree grow? A lot of you are looking into getting fig trees. A lot of you have a few small fig trees that you maybe want to put in the ground, that you maybe want to put into a larger pot, or you want to find a final location in your home or garden for a fig tree. And part of deciding that is knowing how big your fig tree is going to get and how quickly it's going to get there. So let me show you a few examples of how fast a fig tree can grow, different varieties of figs that have different grow rates, and different grow rates for the same variety of fig. I have a general theme on how fig trees grow that is very familiar to a few other trees, not necessarily fruit trees, but general canopy trees. And you got to think figs are in the ficus family, and figs are also related to mulberries in the greater mulberry family. So when we talk about fruit trees and understanding how they grow, if you have some of those trees, they may grow in a similar fashion. Let's jump into it. Coffee's so good. Guys, when we talk about fig trees, and I can talk about fig trees for days, I want to introduce you to something that's common in the landscape world, but I believe is common for fig trees, and that is the 3-year rule. The first year they sleep, the second year they creep, and the third year they leap. I say it's a rule, but in reality it's a guideline for figs, because figs have the ability, when they adapt to a climate or to a condition, they can really take off growing. When fig trees are established in the ground, they have the ability to be pruned all the way back and come back and grow 8 to 9 feet in 1 year. I spoke to the Camellia Club of Wilmington, and I learned a lot about camellias in the months that I spoke. We had representatives come to our club meeting and talk about camellias, and they grow maybe 6 inches a year, so they're a much slower growing plant. Figs are not like that after they're established. Figs can grow like gangbusters. In fact, that 3-year rule, I often tell people the most difficult years to grow figs are the first 3 years. And that's where I come into play and help you guys grow figs and get through that stage. So when you start getting a 4, 5, 6-year fig, it is healthy, it is productive, and it is self-sufficient. But let's talk about the 3-year rule, and I'll show you some examples. These are some first-year trees, or what I say rooted cuttings right here. And they were all rooted this winter in my greenhouse you see behind me. So this one here is a Sal's L, which is a type of hardy Chicago fig or a Mount Etna fig. This is a Ponte Tresa, so that's a rare Adriatic style fig from Switzerland in the Lakes region. And then this is Melanzana, which is Italian for eggplant because it makes huge multicolored, maybe more of a dark colored fig in the shape of what? A melanzana, an eggplant. You can see it had a terminal bud cutting and it grew all the way up about, I don't know, 1.5 feet this year. This right here is Ponte Tresa. It's still a very healthy cutting that is up for sale, but it grew about 8 inches and that's totally fine with me. I want healthy looking leaves and a main branch. Some fig trees take longer than others. If you have a cutting that is maybe smaller or larger than others, like these smaller cuttings that I got off this Paradiso Giovanni, a beautiful article. I've been waiting for this tree for over a decade, deciding when to pull the trigger and pay a lot of money to get a Paradiso Giovanni. And the tree was large enough that I could actually produce cuttings and root cuttings off of the tree that I got in the first year. If you can see, the cuttings on this are a little narrow. They're about 1/8 of an inch and they're a little small. And that means their growth rate is going to take longer. So year after year, it might be growing slow. The health of your cutting can determine how much it's going to grow in the first year. It's not guaranteed, but it can help determine it. This melanzana cutting is clearly past that 1/4 inch mark, upwards of 1/2 inch. And it also had a terminal bud on the top, which made it easier to push out new growth. They don't need a terminal bud on top, like this Sal's L. It was capped here, and the cutting actually grew out and lignified here, but it grew out from a side node all the way up, and that's the first year. So based on how the cuttings grow and the type of cutting it is can determine how much it's going to grow in the first year. Now we look at something like a second year. I'll leave these here for examples. All right, Fig Fam. Year 2 trees, the creep year. Notice something amazing about year 2 fig trees. I have this Negroni here. I have this black Tuscan, which is a newer variety for me, but it's what I am deciding, it's a Figo Preto or a Black Madeira. It's amazing fig. It's an amazing fig. Negroni is a nice resin berry workhorse fig with beautiful leaves, does well in cooler temperatures. This amazing flavorful fig of a black Tuscan, if you know the Black Madeira fig, which many of you do, if you know the Figo Preto, they do like a warmer climate. They are more susceptible to dieback in cooler climates. I'm keeping it in this beautiful container on my patio, which is a huge advantage of people growing fig trees, is you can grow them in containers for their entire life. The year 2 fig tree has fruit. Since fig trees are predominantly propagated, they can reach maturity much sooner. This is popular in citrus trees, persimmon trees, and other fruit trees that are grafted. That grafted wood is already matured. So therefore, it assumes that it is a mature tree, and once it is healthy and strong enough, it'll start producing fruit. If you were to grow many fruit trees from seeds, you would actually notice that it takes many more years for it to fruit. Now, fig trees grown from seed, and what I've researched, and it requires caprification, can still fruit in 4 to 5 years. But we're talking year 2 for fig trees. And this is one of the biggest advantages of growing fig trees to get fresh figs, is you can have fresh figs in their second year. I don't guarantee it. I guarantee the third year. There are a few varieties like your Col de Dames that do like to get a little more established before pushing out bountiful amounts of fruit or any fruit whatsoever. The second year is also where we're talking about your creep. So rather than your 8 to 18 inches of growth, you're looking at that 1 to 3 feet of growth. If you also notice in my Negroni, and this is when I see fig trees that do well and they grow maybe a lot in their first year, is I snip that main branch, that leader branch, and I create 1, 2, rule of threes, 3 scaffolding branches. So this is the beginning of how I would like to organize a fig tree, to create an open center, good airflow, yet still have a canopy for healthy protection from the sun and good leaf exposure. So as we move these year 2 trees off to the side, we can talk about healthy looking year 3 trees. All right. There's a year 3 tree, my green ischia. All right, look at these 2 examples. These are 3-year trees. They're slightly defoliated because of my fig rust and the humidity in the middle of our summer. We had a lot of wet months about 3 weeks ago, if you look at my previous videos. And I've actually battled a little bit of fig rust, but we're having nice sunny dry weather again. I've been spraying the sulfur on them and they seem to be recovering nicely, pushing out new growth that is sans fig rust. Year 3 fig trees, and maybe I can back these up, have fruit on them. If you watch my previous videos on Instagram, my LSU tiger gave me tons of fruit on all this new growth of its secondary branches. I had a bowl full of LSU tigers. They're delicious. They're like Celeste. I would say they're even larger than the Celeste and have more berry tones. And so a lot of people refer to it as a better version of Celeste, but don't forget, Celeste is a great workhorse variety fig for here in the Southeast. Right here is a beautiful fig. It's called Green Ischia. There is a beautiful island off the western coast of Italy called Ischia, I-S-C-H-I-A. And if you ever say like bruschetta or Ischia, you know that that CH noise is that k, 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 and then the SCH make it a ska, ska. So Ischia. This is a magical Adriatic style fig. When I say Adriatic style, again, green exterior with a deep red interior. It actually has some fruit ripening here. I've been having to wrap it in bird netting because the squirrels are taking all the figs off this tree. But what you notice in year 3 with healthy trees is that they are producing fruit on the new growth. They have a main scaffolding branches breaking off that I've pruned. But what I want to cover with year 3 trees is that they are taking on the shape of a fig tree. They're growing nicely. They can grow out as a bush if you'd like. They can grow out as a nice tree form if you want to prune them that way. And let me get one more example. They are looking healthy as ever. They're actually putting out more growth now. This is my LSU Gold. The great part about these LSU varieties is that they fruit early like a Celeste would, and then they'll do a second round of growth. And a lot of fig trees do this when they get mature, but I'm very impressed that they're doing this very early on. So if you look at a third-year tree, this is where we have our leap. They are growing like gangbusters. I've pruned them back because sometimes they can grow a lot more than this. But now you have your fig tree. Year 2, if you're in a warmer climate, you can easily put that fig tree in the ground. Year 3, you can easily put a fig tree in the ground. You can see right here that this fig tree is ready for the ground. However, they can stay in this pot. And if you decide to grow fig trees in pots forever, just make sure that every other winter, cut about a third of the root ball off, and it'll have fresh new soil to grow into and pull nutrients from. And it can keep growing and still fit in the same size pot. And I'm talking like a 10 to 15 gallon pot. And you would do that just about every other year. If you really have a vigorous, healthy growing fig tree and you see that pot filling up with roots and becoming root bound every year, feel free to cut the root ball down about a third. I would do a part of the side and across the bottom and up pot it. And you can start doing that after you notice you have a 3-year-old healthy looking fig tree that's about, I don't know, 4.5, 5 feet tall. So year 3 fig trees, look at that. And I wish I had more, but they already gave me tons of figs this year. They gave my squirrels tons of figs, and they're only this big and they're 3 years old. And that's the magic of a fig tree. By year 3, you have not just a rooted cutting, not a tree on its way, you have a full-blown fig tree giving you figs. So now you'll be asking me, hey, Phil, that's great and all, but my trees didn't grow like that. And I'm like, great, well, let's take a look at them. Because that is an ideal situation. And here let's touch upon the exceptions and some of the exemptions from the 3-year rules or guidelines. This past winter, I bought cuttings from Ross Ratty, the fig boss. If you don't follow him, and I assume many of you do as well, please do. He is a wealth of information. He's contributed so much information and research to the fig communities. I highly suggest following him on all the social media platforms. He also grows a ton of other fruit, and he does it all up in the Philadelphia area, in the Mid-Atlantic, Northeast, where he has some great strategies on how to grow figs up there. I bought these Norella fig cuttings from him, and you notice that they're pretty slow growing. They actually struggled a little bit in the summer, especially this one, and now I'm getting its first fig right here. Hardy Chicagos are a great cold weather variety fig. They are a resilient fig. They are an early producer. And if you ever heavy prune them, they will come back and produce figs very quickly year after year. This is also a Norella cutting that I rooted at the same time. They all came in the same package. And I don't know if you can tell, but it is over 6.5 feet tall. It has figs up and down. Remember, figs ripen on new growth, and I sure have some figs ripening right here. In fact, look at that. A beautiful Hardy Chicago type fig. And the best part is, with these Hardy Chicago figs, you can pick them a little early, and they still have sweet, tart acidity in their flavor. They're great figs, guys. So, I just ate a fig off of a 9-month-old cutting, and that can happen in the fig world. This is an exception. This is more normal. The cuttings I received were great, but this cutting right here, you can see my parafilm wax that was on top of the cutting as it first rooted to help preserve moisture. And it was just happy where I put it. It was happy when I up potted it, and it just kept growing. Now I had fig rust, so all of these leaves had fallen off along the way. And recently I've had it wrapped in bird netting to protect it from the squirrels. Can you believe that? I'm proud of this. I can't take all the credit for everything I do about for figs and about the fig cuttings for it to grow this every time, because I treated all 3 of these cuttings the same way. The only difference that I did is when I noticed that this fig tree was doing really well and starting to outgrow its 1-gallon pot, I put it into a larger 3-gallon pot and it grew from there. So in theory, I could actually up pot these and put them into larger pots and help them grow more. Because it's August, if I'm going to do any up potting right now and then put out new growth, I have to do it now in the next few weeks, because here in North Carolina, it'll start to get cool in about 90 days. And I need at least 60 days for wood on new fig growth to lignify to overwinter safely. This is the exception to the rule. And the exception proves the rule that figs generally grow about at this rate in their first year, but it's not to say they can't grow like this in their first year. This Violet Dauphine is the same way. Look at this thing. It hasn't produced any fruit, but it's just growing. And it is about, I rooted this about 2 months prior to that. And I'm still waiting to taste the fruit from it, but this one's over 7 feet tall. Now this winter, I'm going to cut it all the way down to here. And I'm going to encourage it to grow scaffolding branches out from the sides. And then I'm going to try to root these. And now I have this one right here. This is my Nerucciolo d'Elba. So it has a CI, so you make the ch-ch noise. Nerucciolo d'Elba has a tendency to grow in a dwarf manner. It actually makes smaller figs. I want to say it's about 3 years old now. It might be younger. It may actually grow more like a bush than anything else. And it's supposed to grow this way. It's commonly understood that it grows in more of a dwarf manner. It makes smaller figs, but those figs are delicious. These nuances can occur in the fig world. These are rooted cuttings that, I kid you not, have grown about this much all spring and summer. In this one, its growth rate is very small. A, because it's a small cutting. B, because it is affected by fig mosaic virus, and you can see that right here. So fig mosaic virus can vary branch to branch in the viral load. If I had other branches to work with on this fig cutting, I would actually chop this off and I would hope for it to grow elsewhere. And that is a great way of ridding fig mosaic virus from your fig trees, because it ultimately stunts the growth of your fig tree. I do have to give myself some credit, because a lot of these fig trees are in their 2nd and 3rd years of growth, and maybe even 1.5 years, so even younger. And they are growing really well. They're growing straight up. You can tell they're young for that reason. This LSU strawberry I grew from a 1-year-old tree, or rooted cutting. And see the fruit down here? That's indicative that it is all new growth from this year. So I have to give myself some credit. If anyone's just getting started propagating figs, growing young trees, I can tell you right now, I've killed more fig tree cuttings than you guys. I've killed more fig trees. It's part of the hours that went into practice for propagating fig trees. I would say that these are the fruits of my labor, and I'm pretty proud of how quickly these fig trees are growing in my 2nd official year as a nursery. To be fair, I've been growing fig trees for like 12 years now. All right, so how much can a fig tree grow, a mature fig tree, in a given year? This much. I cut this fig tree to the ground 2 years ago. This branch, and this branch are all 2 years old. The tree itself with the root ball is probably 7 years old. I had it in a container for years, and I put it in the ground about 4 years ago. It is my Paradiso gene fig. It grows like crazy now because its root system is established. Mature fig trees won't grow at this rate. What I did was called a rejuvenation prune. And rejuvenation prune means that to match the root system, it's putting out new growth to create a healthy new tree. And it grew upwards of 8 feet last year. I didn't do any pruning to it this year except for thinning out interior branches here, because I wanted to isolate these 3. But this mature fig tree still gave me suckers here, here, and here, and here that I can actually propagate from and harvest as their own fig trees. In fact, this fig tree is just a year younger than this one. but it grows at a slower rate for whatever reason. And it's a hardy Chicago fig, so I'm surprised that it hasn't grown more, but I think it's being outcompeted by this Paradiso gene. The only downside of letting rejuvenation pruning happen is that it fruits much later in the season in a warmer climate, or it doesn't fruit at all for you and it won't ripen in time. Its second year of growth, it still continues to grow at a more immature rate, if you will, and it is probably put on, this is all new growth up here, another 6 feet of growth that way, and you have more growth that way. Now it is loaded with figs, and they're starting to ripen now. Last year, it didn't ripen any figs until about October, because that's what happens with a rejuvenation prune. But if you have a mature fig tree that's not doing well, I actually advise doing it and reestablishing a brand new tree, if you will, because they will grow 8 feet, 9 feet in a year. That is probably an outlier. I've seen them grow maybe like 6 feet in a year, like my Smith fig tree over here. This is another fig tree that I've cut down to the ground. It struggled from a late freeze at the end of March 2 years ago, and it just never reset itself. You can see the old trunk that I cut it from. If you live on the East Coast, you gotta have a Smith. If you live in the South, you gotta have a Smith. They're fantastic figs. They taste delicious. They have their own flavor, their own look to them. You could call them an Adriatic fig, but they do get sun-tinged and get a little darker, and they have very short hang times where they only need to ripen over the course of a few days versus 7, 8, 9 days plus. And that also, if you can get a fig ripening in between rainy weather, it's a fantastic go-to for a fig tree. But since I rejuvenation pruned it, it's grown about this much in a year, but it hasn't produced a lot of fruit. Moving back to this Paradiso fig, you don't want to cut more really than a third of the fig tree on top and to have it not go into rejuvenation growth mode. A third is kind of like the good rule of how far back to prune your fig tree. I like to keep them lower because I can't reach the figs up there unless I get a ladder. So unless I have figs down below and up high, I don't want to grow it like this. I kind of want them to canopy outwards. However, it's miraculous to see how big a fig tree can get. Like, this is 2 years, guys, since I cut it to the ground. And I now have an 10, 11 foot tree. And it's producing bountiful amounts of fruit that I'm getting very few of because the squirrels grab them before they're fully ripe. So I'm gonna have to put the net on this because I see some great Paradiso genes on here. Look how much this can grow in 2 years, guys, let alone 1 year. So once fig trees' root systems get established, watch out because they will grow for you. And if they don't grow well, you can certainly prune them to the ground. If you grow fig trees in containers, they will have a slower growth rate. So you can actually confine them and make these beautiful bonsai-styled fig trees just by keeping them in a container and pruning the root ball every winter, putting in new soil every year, and you can stop wherever you want on how big a container to get for its final growing space. When a fig tree starts to feel fully mature, its growth rate on a given branch will slow, but it has lots of branches to work with. And it'll start putting out more and more fruit every year. So we're looking at a 5-year-old tree now that I've done the rule of threes to, with its scaffolding branches, secondary branches, and now at its tertiary branches, I don't necessarily have to follow the rule of threes, but I can just prune as needed to maintain the canopy without it getting too congested. Over here, you can see that when a fig tree is really happy and putting out new growth, almost every node, and this is my Genovese Nero AF, every node is putting out figs. And boy, let me tell you, Genovese Nero, it's just like I-258. It's amazing, syrupy, sweet figs with rich berry tones. Rub it on some crusty bread. I did have some available. All of them are sold, even at a premium price, because these fig trees are so good. They are not what you're going to find in a grocery store. And that's really what I want to educate everyone on. But if you can grow your own fig tree in a given space, and we're talking a 10 foot by 10 foot swath for a given tree, you will get yourself bountiful amounts of fruit. Using some of these pruning techniques, you can mature the tree sooner at a more manageable height that we can reach all the fruit of. Rejuvenation prunes are good for getting that tree back to a healthy, vigorous growth status where you have a higher canopy quickly, but you're not going to get fruit that year. And then you're going to want to manage how much growth you want for the following years after that. But if you can grow it in more of a pragmatic fashion year over year, what you end up with is this perfectly manicured tree that at the same time is growing in a natural organic matter. So working with nature is the ultimate goal. But as you see here, now that I have all these mature cuttings and branches that are probably over a 1/4 inch thick or more, that's when you'll really see consistent fruit production across a tree. And this tree has probably only grown an additional 1.5 foot on its canopy now that it's mature as a 7-foot tree. Now I can prune it back a little bit, and I might remove some isolated offshoot branches to maintain this canopy, and then I can propagate with those cuttings again. If at any time I really wanted to prune this back, I would cut it all the way back, but it might start shooting out suckers from the sides. It might start shooting out single branches that'll grow 6 feet, and that's okay. It's just the fig tree trying to recover, but you're just gonna have to manage it as it grows, which is a perfectly healthy thing to do. It's like weeding in the garden, right? But it's something that I take pride and joy in, growing a healthy, happy fig tree in a healthy, happy climate. Because when you have a happy, healthy fig tree, it produces fruit, especially a mature one. So you kind of see what the end result mature habit of a fig tree can be. You can see what happens over here with my Peter's honey. You can see with this Peter's honey, a fig tree that's kind of starting to enter that phase that the Genovese Nero has. In fact, it grew this much in a year because I had pruned it back to the scaffolding branches and these secondary branches. But I'm almost reluctant to take anything back more than probably a foot after it lignifies this winter. And I'm also getting a second round of fruit here, because when a fig tree is really happy and starts to get into the cycle of your climate, it'll start to learn when to wake up a little sooner. It'll start to put out fruit more as it matures and becomes a stronger, healthier, mature tree. And sure enough, you might even have a second round of fruiting and growth. I know that's very common in California, but we're zone 8B. I've harvested figs in November here. I think I may have even had a December fig once, guys. But to get 2 main crops of figs, this is my Peter's honey, it's not out of the question when you have a mature fig tree that is a nice variety. So in contrast to my Peter's honey that's becoming mature, we have a perfect example of a rejuvenation prune that did somewhat what I wanted it to do. But unlike those really tall, skinny trees that are a year or 2 old, this tree is about 6 years old, and it's my Stella. Beautiful leaves, makes huge fruit, but this is all new growth. And I tried to do a rejuvenation prune, and it didn't like it. And sometimes that happens. Certain fig trees want to grow like a bush, like your Mount Etna types. Certain ones, like my Genovese Nero, want to grow like a tree. My Col de Dames want to grow like a tree. Stella actually is a slower growing tree variety, and it invests a lot of energy into each individual fruit, and that's why it becomes so large. But as a whole, it's just a slower grower, where you could have a hardy Chicago type, like a Marseille Black or a Celeste that'll just grow a ridiculous amount in 1 year. Stellas do have a slower growing habit, but what I'm going to do here after this year is, despite having a rejuvenation prune year, I'm going to cut it back to here and have it sprout branches outwards to create those scaffolding branches again, and slowly work it up to a mature fig tree. Because ultimately, I kind of want my trees all to look like this, because it'll give me lots of branches with new growth on them, with terminal buds, which equals lots of figs, and they can invest energy in each branch and canopy as so, and not be too tall that I can't reach the figs. Last but not least, we have a fig tree that I've wrapped in a bird net because it has ripe figs on it all over and the squirrels have been getting it. Here's my Ponte Tresa. Let me tell you, fig fam, this is a good fig. It's worth the wrapping. It doesn't look pretty, but let's see what we're working with here. This is the beauty of a fig tree. This is a 3-year-old fig tree, and each of its branches had plenty of figs, bountiful figs that are all ripening now. And I am actually getting some. You can see it's about a 30 to 40 gram fig. Let's open her up. Guys, look at that. Ponte Tresa from the Lakes region of Switzerland, where they actually speak Italian. You can see how syrupy that is. This is a 3-year-old fig tree that lives in a pot. It's going to stay here as a container fig. And that's what kind of figs it makes. Oh my gosh. It grew about a foot this year. It reached maturity in this pot. I like it this large. It's a perfect accent for any patio. And it gave me 50 figs this year. Syrupy sweet, guys. The best part about a fig tree is if it doesn't have that acidic bite that a lot of strawberries and other blueberries have, it has that syrupy sweetness that lingers in your mouth. My hands are covered in sugar syrup. It's nothing like eating a fruit that stops you in your tracks, makes you take a step back and reflect. It's so good, guys. I'm glad you got to watch me eat this fig. If you don't have a Ponte Tresa, I have one left for sale. I think someone's going to buy it. It is available online at phyllisfigs.com. I wanted this to be a guide for someone who's looking to put a fig tree in their yard or property. If you live further north, look up against the side of a wall. If you're living anywhere in the south, most of my yard is conducive to growing a fig tree. I'm in zone 8B here in Wilmington, North Carolina, right near the coast. A lot of these pots, they stay outside all winter long in their containers. It's not a non-issue. I think the coldest night we had, it got down to 18. If any of them I felt were at risk, they would be the 1-gallon baby figs, and I put them into my greenhouse or my unheated garage. The one hack is they do like to be near structures. As someone I told, they like to have their roots shaded, but their leaves sunny. And so that's why people grow them up against fences, greenhouses, sheds, etc. But I wanted you to get an idea of how much space you need to grow a fig tree, because you can have as little space as this container pot here. You can have as much space as a 15 by 15 foot space for a giant fig tree. When I go to open my fig tree orchard and nursery, I'm probably looking at 15-foot spacing, but in my backyard, all the trees that we went over today are at about 6-foot spacing, and they still can have a canopy that is about 7 or 8 feet tall and match that 6-foot wide space. So I want to say thank you, Fig Fan, for joining me. If you really like this and got a good perspective on how fig trees grow, I got plenty of other videos to help guide you on your fig tree journey and just general gardening tips. So like, subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon, Fig Fan.